when you have a variety of different perspectives on your senior leadership team or on a leadership team, you have the potential to increase earnings, increase growth, increase how successful your organization is doing. I think that's really powerful. Welcome to the Head of the Table podcast. I'm Nora Riddle. I'm your host. I'm a former policy advisor, former chief of staff in corporate America, and I'm on a mission to help today's current and aspiring leaders address the many challenges that come with leadership. I'm really excited to have you today. We're on episode 3, and we're going to be talking about why does the table look different that you're sitting at as a leader and why that should matter to you. I'm really excited for today's episode because this is one of the topics that I love talking about. And I also think that there are some really cool opportunities for leaders to address the challenges that are facing us and our organizations and institutions today. What makes a strong leader? Easy question. I know. Of course, you don't need help with this at all. Just kidding. Today, we're going to be talking about some kind of heavy topics, but I think there's going to be a lot of creative solutions that we come up with together. And I'm just really excited to dive into it with you. So leadership has been shifting, and I think it's for a variety of reasons. In the day and age of technology, and not just AI, but the internet, hybrid work environments, remote work environments, leadership looks a lot different than it once did. And I also think that there has been a lot of shifts culturally in a lot of different countries. And cultural shifts are always challenging to deal with, both personally as people and as leaders. And so today, I kind of want to set one ground rule for us as we're having this conversation. And that is that we're calling each other in. And the term calling each other in is, instead of kind of maybe you see something you disagree with and you call it out, you're telling that person, hey, why don't you join the conversation? Why don't we chat about it? Because at the end of the day, all of our different experiences and our backgrounds are only going to help us tackle these issues if we're doing it together. So that's my ground rule. Let's call each other in for learning experiences, growth opportunities, creativity, and let's have a great time. So, what makes a strong leader? The eternal question. Today, we're going to have a little bit more data than we have in the past. My economic nerd self just really wanted to bring in some numbers and figures and a variety of information to kind of help us look at holistically what is leadership and what are the positive and negative impacts leadership can have. McKinsey in 2023 created a synthesis on what leadership was, how is leadership successful, and ultimately what they found is diversity in leadership is associated with broader holistic impact and remains correlated with outperformance. What does that mean? Holistic impact was defined as growth ambition, workforce satisfaction, and social impact. So think growth ambition is growth of a company, growth of revenue. Workforce satisfaction is how satisfied are your employees that work at your company. And social impact is whether maybe that's giving back to your local community, could be regional, could be country, could be global. It really just depends on the scale of your company. But the really interesting thing about this data is kind of the back half, is that diversity in leadership remains correlated with outperformance. Outperformance is generating more revenue than you're anticipating, growing faster than you're anticipating. And I think diversity has become a bit of a buzzword. And if you haven't listened to any of the other episodes, I've talked about kind of what a buzzword is, but I'll repeat myself so that you're not confused. A fuzzword is a buzzword, so a really popular word that a lot of people have used to the point that it's kind of lost meaning. So I'm going to define it for the sake of our sanity in this conversation, so we're not having 18 different definitions of the same word. Diversity in leadership, we're talking about different backgrounds, and that could be educational, that could be from different fields, that could be from upbringing. There's a whole host of different ways that we are all kind of bringing a different story, bringing a different expertise to the table when we are trying to make our companies better, our organizations better. So for the sake of this conversation, that's what that means. The Boston Consulting Group did a multi-country study that shows more diverse leadership teams generate high innovation revenue and EBT. Let's break down what that means. Innovation revenue is your ability to innovate in the marketplace and revenue tied to that. So say you have a current product, say you sell pencils. Well, say you've designed a new form of pencil that means you never, ever, ever have to put lead into the mechanical pencil ever again, or the pencil never has to be sharpened. And EBT is earnings before interest and tax. And I think that's really helpful to kind of look at that direct connection where when you have a variety of different perspectives on your senior leadership team or on a leadership team, you have the potential to increase earnings, increase growth, increase how successful your organization is doing. I think that's really powerful. And something I would take away from this is not that you need to completely scrap your leadership team. Sometimes small shifts can make a big difference. So if there's an open position in your leadership team, bringing on someone who has a different experience, because if you bring on someone from a different sector, maybe they have the ability to open new markets for you. If you bring on someone who has a different background than the leaders sitting at your table today, you're going to get different conversations, which can result in more innovation. It can result in more creativity. So I would try to think at how can you take little steps now? We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The Harvard Business Review did a piece that talked about inclusive leadership behaviors and kind of the benefits of them. So inclusive leadership behaviors attract retention and talent, boost creativity, and increase the excellence of employees. So overall, employee performance, your ability to attract new talent and keep that talent, all are increasing whenever you have inclusive leadership. Now, how is diverse leadership and inclusive leadership different? Diverse leadership is kind of the makeup of who your leaders are and what they're bringing to the table. Inclusive leadership is looking at how your leadership is bringing in your employees, bringing in the people that are at your organization and including them. If you have an organization with more inclusive leadership, your organization is 73% more likely to reap innovation revenue, 70% more likely to capture new markets, up to 50% more likely to make better decisions for the company and its employees, and up to 36% more likely to have above average profitability. Now, I know a lot of people have talked about inclusivity, inclusive. Again, I think it's another fuzzword where we've kind of lost the meaning of it. So we are going to go back to some old school economics to define inclusive organizations and look at how you can be taking steps to reap all of the rewards that I just talked about. So what is inclusivity and what does it have to do with any of this? Well, if we go back to Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, we look at the social contract theory. And for any of you who have taken economics classes, you will remember reading about this. The social contract theory is a classical economic theory that explains how societies form implicit or explicit agreements to create institutions, i.e., governments, laws, norms, in exchange for security, order, and mutual benefit. What does that mean, though? That means that as a society, we have created implicit or explicit rules. So implicit can be social behaviors. If you're in the US or you've been to the US, it's kind of how in the South, everyone will say hi to each other. But if you go up to New York City, no one talks to anyone. Those can kind of be some implicit rules or agreements of how a society is formed. So it can be a lot more behavioral. Explicit are like laws and regulations, like how we have all agreed that we should not murder each other. So the social contract theory is really rudimentary, but it's helpful whenever we're looking at how our institutions are formed and how they can evolve. Because the idea is when people feel invested in institutions, they perceive them as legitimate. Whether you're a current leader or an aspiring leader, thinking about how institutions are created based off of a belief of people in that institution is really important. Obviously, there can be a little bit more of a clear tie here if we're talking about governments, but how does that apply to business? If your employees don't feel like they have the ability to grow long-term at your company, they will not believe in your company as much, and they may choose to leave and take their expertise elsewhere. So the social contract theory matters a lot in our organizations, and it matters a lot as we show up as leaders, because not only are we trying to get an idea of who believes in us as leaders, but also we have to see how our employees, how those we lead are feeling about the institutions we are in charge of. And if they have less faith, it's on us to investigate why that's happening and make shifts accordingly. So how does this benefit us? Obviously, we've talked a little bit about some of the statistics, revenue, profitability, people are happier at organizations. That all sounds really great. But why are these things related? Well, let's ask some Nobel Prize winners in economics. Darren Acemoglu, Simon Johnson, and James A. Robinson demonstrated a direct relationship between institutions and prosperity. Through researching a variety of different countries and looking at a lot of economic data, they found that the richest 20% of the world's countries are now 30 times richer than the poorest 20%. Now, why is the income gap between the richest and the poorest countries persistent? They looked at a variety of different cities, and they were able to demonstrate that the initial differences in colonial institutions are important for explaining the vast differences in prosperity that we see today. And this is where it's really interesting. When we look at European colonizers, which is predominantly the examples that these economists looked at, there were kind of two systems that were put in place, and there was a reason for this. So the first, more exploitative, was often exploiting the indigenous population and extracting natural resources to benefit the colonizer. And so when there were fewer colonizers, the institutions were designed in a way to be extractive. They would often not have elections at all, and there were extremely limited political rights. However, with the other institution, it's often inclusive political and economic systems for the long-term benefit of European settlers. So that's not saying that it was inclusive to everyone, but it was saying that they set up political and economic systems that were designed in a way that could be inclusive of some of the people that were living there. There were often more colonizers in that situation because they were coming to settle somewhere versus coming somewhere to extract resources. They designed more inclusive economic institutions that incentivized those that lived there to work and invest in the new land that they lived in. And there was often a more demand for political rights and shared profit. And it was designed, again, for those who were living there to benefit. Now, that's not saying that everyone was included in that institution or those institutions, but these two systems were set up very, very differently, and there is an economic difference as to the long-term impacts. institutions that were created to exploit the masses, aka the extractive institutions, were bad for long-run economic growth, while ones that established fundamental economic freedoms and the rule of law were good for economic growth long-term. Even if the extractive economic systems provided short-term gains for a ruling elite, the introduction of more inclusive institutions, less extraction, and the rule of law created long-term benefits for everyone in a society. And it's really interesting because you think, why wouldn't we then just change or create new institutions that would benefit everyone? Well, there's actually a reason behind that. A political system that replaces leaders who do not keep promises of reformed economic systems enables economic reforms. However, a lot of the elite or those who have benefited from that don't believe that they will be rewarded in the same manner if you change the system, even though they will benefit from it. And I think there's a little bit of psychology here. When we think about our brains, 95% of our brain is subconscious. And the subconscious brain is the thing that keeps you alive. So I know we often think about, it's the thing that makes sure our organs continue, pumping blood and we're able to breathe. But also it's kind of the thing in our brain that's making sure we don't fall off the cliff, we don't get killed by a bear, all of those things. And to the subconscious brain, any form of change is bad. You might be changing to a better job, but your brain will associate you changing to a better job as the same thing as being chased by a bear. Your subconscious brain is focused on one thing and one thing alone: predictability. I think that there is an element of those who are benefiting from these systems not wanting to change because your subconscious brain does not believe that you're safe. The moment that it shifts in your subconscious brain is if you're not benefiting from it, if you're tired of the same results, and that can take a really long time. So I do think that there is this element of people being afraid of change, and not because they want to see people suffer, but because their subconscious brain is making the decisions. And so I think as leaders, it's really our responsibility to call in those people and say, I understand that you have benefited from this, but you can also benefit from change. So if you have leadership that maybe has benefited from the way that things always are, or really feels comfortable with specifically the way that you do interviews or how you recruit or the promotion cycle, maybe you are at a company where they really want someone to have 5 years of experience in a certain role before they can get promoted, looking at why you choose to have those processes and why it's beneficial to the company is important, because there could be a chance that someone is afraid of change, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being afraid of change, but we cannot let the fear of change stop us from growing as a company, growing as leaders, growing our institutions in a way that benefits everyone. So how can you be a more inclusive leader and provide more opportunities for your workforce and for your organization to grow in a positive way? You should be anticipating some of the challenges facing your employees, facing your organization, and trying to create communication specifically on that. A key issue I worked on whenever I was the chief of staff was improving communication between leadership and professionals in a hybrid environment after COVID. Leadership really wanted to show up for their professionals, and professionals really wanted the mentorship, the guidance, the information about the organization, but they were kind of passing each other because either people weren't in the office, or they weren't as available, or they didn't know how to ask the right questions of leadership to get the information. So we started presenting that information through fireside chats. Whether you're holding a town hall or you're creating some surveys to get more information, trying to shape the conversation to get the right information that you need is really important. And there's a lot of people either at the professional level or maybe at the middle management level that can help you as a leader shape some of that discourse. So it's really important through your coffee chats and your conversations with professionals, with middle management as a leader, trying to get a pulse of generally where they are, because often there's going to be at least one extroverted professional that wants to share a little bit of information about where they are and what's going on with them. And you can take that information and do a broader pulse to see if other people are frustrated by the economy and not getting promotions, frustrated by the cost of higher education and not being able to get the technical education and skill sets that they need to advance at the company, for example. At the end of the day, it's not just about getting feedback, it's about quality of feedback. So you as a leader can ask those questions. But if you're a professional listening to this, aspiring to be a leader, it's important that you show up to your leadership not with just a whole host of problems, but also with some creative solutions. You never know what they might take you up on. For example, I started by doing some fireside chats with a couple of partners, and very quickly we were able to grow that into a bigger event that we did on a regular cadence, and it improved communication. Now, besides communication, I think continuous learning really is an important element of this. When you're looking at leadership training and how you can help leaders be inclusive of the professionals and management and everyone tied to your organization, there are kind of some target areas. You maybe want to look at micro behaviors or cultural norms or developing key traits of leaders. It's also important to consider that maybe you want to foster different traits in different leaders. We all don't have to look the same, and maybe you have certain leaders that are really great with people and certain leaders that are really great with data. And having a variety of people at your table in leadership positions, bringing all of that to the conversation is going to make you a stronger leader, and it's going to benefit your organization. So to summarize today's episode, if you're looking to grow revenue, grow creativity, be more innovative, and have an organization where you're going to have professionals that want to join your organization and want to stay, making sure that those people feel valued and have a voice and have a say in your organization is a key priority if you're going to be a strong leader. Not only is that going to benefit the environment of your organization, but it is going to make you a stronger organization. You have an increased chance of entering new markets. You have an increased chance of getting innovation revenue. You have an increased chance of overall outperforming your expectations. So whether you're a current leader or an aspiring leader, I hope this episode demonstrated how important it is to not only show up as leaders, but include people at the table, because the table's continuing to evolve. We're more interconnected as ever, coming from a variety of different backgrounds, and leveraging the expertise that you have sitting at your table is more important than ever. But also having a clear understanding that institutions are formed based off of the belief that people have in them. And if you want your organization to not only be profitable today, but profitable in the long run, there are some clear delineations that when people feel their organization is investing in them, they invest back in their organization. Thank you for diving in to some classical economic theory with me and looking at the newer research that's coming out every year about how the economy functions, how our societies function, and at the end of the day, how we can all help each other become better leaders and show up for each other. Next week at the head of the table, we will be discussing imposter syndrome. What is imposter syndrome? It's that nagging feeling in the back of your mind, making you question if you can even do the thing you're doing. We'll be getting into how imposter syndrome impacts leadership and also how maybe it's not that bad of a thing. Thank you so much for joining us at the head of the table. I hope you have a great week.